to Laptop Powerwall episode 10, more data on recycled laptop cells. With my latest batch of 55 laptop batteries, I've collected a bit more data than I did with my previous batch. This time I've been noting the laptop brand, the initial voltage of the cell pairs, the internal resistance and the capacity. Back in episode 9, I showed you a chart with internal resistance versus capacity for 217 pairs of 18650s, and here's a version of that chart with a linear trend line which shows a nice clear signal. There's definitely a relationship between internal resistance and capacity. So that's good to know. It means that when I measure the internal resistance, anything over a certain threshold I can just discard, send back to the recyclers and move on and not bother with the whole discharging capacity measured step, which takes ages. With my new set I have gathered internal resistance capacity, and it's very similar. And if you combine both graphs you can see the two trend lines are very similar, so it's pretty clear that there really is a strong relationship between resistance and capacity. Next up we have initial volts measured versus capacity. Now before seeing this, I had assumed that there would be some kind of correlation between initial volts and final capacity. I was assuming that really low voltage would translate into more likely to be a lower capacity cell. But if you look at this chart, going right back to below 1 volt, there's a pretty good spread between over 400 milliamps down to under 1500, and that pattern is pretty much all the way up to 4 volts. You can see in the collection of batteries that I had, there's a lot more batteries that were above 2 volts and even more above 3 volts, but they're all pretty well spread. The only really great cells were about 3.5 volts when I first measured them, so that's reasonable, but it does suggest that it is worth going through the bother of trickle charging those undervoltage cells up and then going through the whole fully charge, discharge, measured capacity effort, because some of them will be pretty good, which is interesting. And lastly, we have brand versus capacity. So once again, I was hoping to see some nice clear signal that told me some brands are good and some brands are not so good. But again, it's not nearly so clear. If you start off by looking at the Toshiba cells, that's the ones that I had the most of. I had 64 pairs of cells, and it ranges from 555 all the way down to a crappy 500 milliamps. But there's a nice gradual spread throughout the whole range, except for those three right at the top. I suspect that those were actually quite new cells and that battery got put in the wrong box. So when I went to the recycler, I got a really good laptop battery instead of a crappy old one. That's what I think is going on there. If you look at the Hewlett-Packard cells, once again there's a nice spread between over 4,000 milliamp hours down to below 1,000. So that's clearly both of the Toshiba and the Hewlett-Packard have a complete range of cells. And similarly with Lenovo, it ranges from above 4,000 to down below 1,000. It's a pretty small data set there, but still quite a range. So I think you can assume that if you get a Lenovo cell, it's got the same odds as Hewlett-Packard or Toshiba cells. The Sony, really small data set, they're all pretty good, so it's a bit hard to make any hard and fast rules. I'd say if you have the opportunity, Sony cells are probably fine to grab. And IBM cells, I got 3 pairs of IBM cells that were middling average, but it's such a small data set that it's pretty hard to make any generalizations, except that IBM sold their laptop business back in 2005, I think, to Lenovo. So any battery branded IBM is really old, and I would suggest not worth picking up. But for all the others, go for them. And prior to picking up these cells, I had assumed that Acer and Dell would be less good, but having seen this data and how pretty much all the brands have a full range, I would assume the same is probably true for Dell and Acer. So if you have a chance to grab any of those brands, except IBM, I'd say this data suggests go for it. And so there you have it. Let me know if you see anything else in this data. I'll put a link to the actual data set, the Google spreadsheet, in the description below. Thanks for watching. Cheers.